conversation, the private investment problem making India more attractive. Please put your hands together as I invite our distinguished guests and speakers, Chairman Godrej Group, Adi Godrej. Can we have a huge round of applause for Mr. Adi Godrej? And our next guest, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Deepak Parekh, Chairman HDFC Ltd. Let's hear it for both of our speakers for this session. A huge round of applause. Let's put our hands together and welcome them for the session. Welcome, gentlemen. Shweta, over to you.
Thanks, Avantika. Well, the two stalwarts here really don't need an introduction. They have been the leading lights of corporate India. They are known not to mince their words at all. They say it as it is. Both have built businesses on extremely high ethics and a fabulous value system. And most importantly, they've both been pioneers. HDFC has introduced India to the concept of mortgage banking, and the Godrej Group is the original flag bearer of the Make in India campaign. In fact, I was reading that the Queen was visiting maybe 100 years ago, and she actually bought a Godrej safe from India at that time. So that's what we are talking about. So, well, we are discussing here why private investment is not as encouraging as it ought to be. Considering India is growing at a phenomenal pace. In fact, we are the second fastest growing economy in the world today. We have a huge demographic dividend. We've had a good monsoon, 2 consecutive years. Yet, we are in a phase, and we have a very stable government. And if there's anything that the UP elections have shown, that people are voting for a stable, good government. So what is it that's holding private investment? Mr. Parekh, let's begin with you. What's the problem here?
See, Shweta, there are 4 key engines of growth: government expenditure, private consumption, exports, and private investments. The first 3 cylinders are growing very well, firing on all cylinders. Consumption, domestic consumption is our strength. And government, the present government, when it came to power in 2014, they had a strategy of investing, ramping up investments as public investments. Because public investments are a precursor to private investment. Public investments are a confidence builder for private investments to come in. If you see exports, last 6 months, the exports have been rising month on month. In fact, last month it had a double-digit growth. Barring a few sectors, exports have grown. So the problem or the troubled area is private sector investments. There are a number of reasons why private sector investments have been slow. My personal view is excess capacity is one. We can talk about it. And China's role in excess capacity. Stalled projects is the other reason. There are a large number of projects that are still stalled. CMI says 77,000 crores worth of projects are stalled. The other reason is stress on twin balance sheet problem. The company and the banks are both stressed. So these are some of the reasons why private investment is not yet picking up. But I'm very optimistic that you will see private investment picking up in the fourth quarter of this year, after the GST rollout.
That's encouraging. Mr. Godrej, you are in the consumer durable business. You're also putting a lot of emphasis on real estate. What is it that's holding back consumption? And would you echo the optimism that Mr. Parekh has shared right now, that private investment could pick up in the next third or fourth quarter? Because some industrialists have a more grim view of it. There was someone I was speaking with who said that private investment could take about maybe a year and a half or even 2 years to pick up. So it's on. Yes.
Well, I think private consumption has slowed down a bit. It's decelerated. It hasn't slowed down, but it has decelerated over the last couple of years. One of the major reasons to my mind is that earlier, when real GDP growth was only around 6 or 6.5%, the nominal GDP growth, including inflation, used to be 12, 13, 14%. Now our real GDP growth has accelerated a little to 7, 7.5%. But because inflation has been very low, nominal GDP growth is growing only at around 8%. So the feel-good factor of many consumers has been poor, and therefore consumption acceleration has slowed down. It has decelerated. Now, I expect once GST is in place, there will be a tremendous boost to GDP growth and consumption will rise. And that will be the trigger for greater growth. Another reason why private investment has been a little lower is of course because consumption growth has been low. But a lot of people have very smartly, with just balancing equipment, low investment, increased their capacity as well. This is a new trend in India which is creating productivity growth, but investment growth has slowed down as a result.
Okay, so that's an interesting point that you're making here, because mechanization and use of technology is of course leading to increased efficiencies, but then on ground it's not creating as many jobs as we need. Mr. Parekh, I'll go back to the point of the twin deficit problem, stretched corporate balance sheets. What happened in the last 3-4 years? Why is it that, how could so many companies go wrong in their assessments of demand, and why are we seeing a flux right now? You know, what really transpired in the last 3-4 years, if you could just tell us that.
Well, I did mention China's role. If you take China and India, China has become India's largest trading partner. Our trade with China is $70 billion. But we import $60 billion from China and we export only $10 billion to China. So there's a huge negative trade balance. And as you know, China is dumping anything and everything at far cheaper prices than what Indian manufacturers can produce, can manufacture. Because they want their factories to be running, they want their employees to be get paid, and they don't worry about ROE and ROA and all those numbers. So China factor is one of the reasons why our investments are, private sector investments are slow. There is excess capacity in our manufacturing side. Whether you look at cement, whether you look at auto, whether you look at steel, aluminum, any sector, they are all working at 70-80% capacity. None of these sectors are working at 90-95 when there is a need for a new factory or a new greenfield expansion.
In terms of ease of doing business, which is plays a very integral role in facilitating investment, has there been a change? Because we're talking about excess capacity. At the same time, we have a massive Make in India campaign. We have announced a slew of anti-corruption measures. But are things changing on ground? Mr. Godrej.
Well, certainly the government has taken some steps to improve ease of doing business. But we must understand that we have inherited from our socialist days very difficult conditions in which to do business. Whilst they are improving, we still have too many controls, we still have too many permissions to be obtained for every little thing. One of the areas which Deepak is also involved a lot with, where that is very evident, is building permissions.
Right.
It's very, very complicated. We change them so often, etc. So these are the areas which come in the way. A lot will have to be done if we are to become competitive in ease of doing business.
So when we speak with the government officials on this, they tell us that they've scrapped a lot of old redundant legislations. They're trying to bring in single window clearances. But is it really happening? One, and clearly, as in it seems like a long road ahead.
See, so far as ease of ease of doing business at the central level, at the central government level, a lot of changes have happened. They have not yet percolated to the state. What Adi is talking about, real estate. Land is a state subject. We have to go to the state authorities, the local municipalities, the local government, whether it is in any state. Those reforms have not yet filtered down, and the permissions required are 29 or 30 permissions. There is no single window clearance. There is no visible sign of ease of doing business in getting building permits, for instance. And housing construction, office construction has such a huge multiplier effect on labor, steel, sand, cement, everything. So we need to push up construction. And housing, shortage of housing, affordable housing, the government has given. What can the center do? The center, this year's budget was an affordable housing budget, according to me. Massive amount of incentives. That's what the center can do. It's for the states to shape up. And we hope that the states shape up and improve their systems and processes and approval systems.
Well, we had some state chief ministers here. I think they've stepped out. They should have heard this.
May I come in?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
I think some states are taking steps to improve ease of doing business. And what is very good is we've set a competitive spirit going between states in terms of attracting investment. So, for example, in our group, we have set up a couple of factories. They're small factories in the animal feed space at quite a fast pace. So we were allotted land quite quickly. We got building permissions quite quickly. So some states are being competitive. I do hope every state starts competing with each other to generally improve the ease of doing business in the country.
Okay. Taxation is also an integral issue when it comes to ease of doing business, and India seems to really lag behind on the World Economic Forum rankings in that aspect. Post demonetization, there is a lot of concern on the return of the Inspector Raj. I wanted to get both of your thoughts into this. Would you say that return of the Inspector Raj would be warranted because the intent seems to be cracking down on black money and corruption? And what's the fallout of that?
See, you are worried or there is fear in you if you do something wrong. First of all, why do we have to do something wrong? Why do you want to evade taxes? Why do you want to make black money? If your company or you are running a straight business and you pay your normal taxes, we are not fearful of anything. We are not harassed by any tax inspectors. Only if you do something wrong, you are harassed. Like people who have deposited large sums of money in the bank account due to demonetization, they should be harassed. They should be questioned and they should be penalized.
Okay. Mr. Godrej,
Will
it hurt the spirit of...
Yeah, I feel that there are very good objectives, like you mentioned. But objectives should be sought to be achieved not by cracking down, or at least certainly not by only cracking down. It must be incentivization. The system should be such that the opportunity to do anything incorrect should be discouraged. And I think that would work very well. For example, I feel in India, whenever we have reduced rates of taxes, as we are now going to likely do with the GST in indirect taxes, or even in direct taxes, we've had great success. And it's been very successful. But whenever we try and crack down, or whenever we try and control things, that doesn't work as well. So I think there must be more emphasis on incentivization. And to my mind, one of the big change we need in this country is lower rates of direct taxes, especially on corporates.
Okay. So the entire electioneering that happened around the state elections was a very pro-poor plank, a lot of focus on welfare and doles even. This, especially from a government which, from a perception point of view, was supposed to be very pro-business and pro-investment. But during the course of the last 3 years, we see a change somewhat. So I wanted to ask you, at this point, what can the government do to spur consumption, to spur private investment? Because from what we've understood so far, ease of doing business, it's taking time to percolate on ground. We're seeing a government that's spending, public expenditure has gone up, but that's not necessarily inspired confidence in the private sector to go ahead and invest.
Well, if you take the example of steel products, Indian steel industry was reeling under, bleeding away, because we were getting all steel products from China at ridiculously low prices, till the central government intervened and put a minimum import price. Now you see Indian steel companies are working at 80% capacity from the 50s. And now they're able to service their loans. And I'm sure in the next few months they'll go up to 85-90%. But unfortunately, on every product, the government cannot put anti-dumping duties. I hear that in aluminum foil also they're thinking of anti-dumping duty. So they are highlighting products where there's a large employment, where there is possibility of a large investment, and trying to block the goods coming from China. But we have to have, that is a major problem. Even your furniture is coming from, Ganpati idols are made in China. Each and everything comes from.
So more protectionist government?
Well, you have to be protectionist to your, if large countries like UK and US are being protectionist, why not we become protectionist? We are a large country, we have a large market in India, but we have to protect our Indian industry.
But sir, isn't it true that competition helps you thrive and do better?
Correct. But you must also see quality of products that come in. If you see quality of products that China is dumping, it's far poor quality than what Indian quality is, or what any other. Take the power sector. I know a few power generation companies that bought Chinese turbines compared to US or German turbines. In 3 years, they are having difficulty. And they're talking to American suppliers to replace all the Chinese turbines, because the longevity, the durability of Chinese products is not there. So Indian industry will also realize, Indian consumers, like I know for a fact that the common man who buys a small car will first see whether they're Chinese tires or Chinese battery or Indian tires and Indian. They don't want Chinese tires. Indian consumers are smart.
That's true, yeah.
And they insist on Indian tires and Indian car batteries and Indian products to be used.
So be Indian, buy Indian.
Be Indian, buy Indian.
Mr. Godrej, your thoughts on this? Would you agree with Mr. Parekh here?
No, I think many of the statements he has made, I certainly agree with it. But I think once we are in the GST framework, a lot of the situation will change for the better. Because once you are in GST, evading indirect taxes becomes very difficult.
So evasion will be taken care of?
Evasion will come down tremendously. That will lead to higher revenues in the government. And hopefully over a period of time, it could lead to lower rates of taxes.
Of doing business and duplication, transporting goods from the south to the north, it becomes a seamless way with GST. We have to wait and see. The first few months after the introduction of GST, there may be confusion because people are not fully aware how much, how to tax, who will refund and all that.
Right.
But I'm sure that in the next 3 months after introduction, we'll be on a much stronger wicket. And various economists and forecasters have said if you have a good GST system, your GDP growth rate will go up by 150 to 200 basis points. Let's wait and see.
So, sir, I've spoken to a few experts on GST, and what they've said is that the GST in its current form that we are seeing in India, it's not going to be as simple because there are going to be multiple tax slabs. There are a whole host of exemptions. You'll have multiple registrations across states, which will be a challenge for companies like Paytm also, for that matter. Mr. Vijay Shekhar Sharma is right here. So it's going to hurt entrepreneurship in a way. It's going to hurt the services sector, which has been the driving force behind the India growth story. So, does that resonate with you at some level?
Not to me. It is understanding how it will operate, how will it work.
If an ideal GST, in every way ideal, were to give a benefit of say 100, I feel the present system will still give us a benefit of 80. clearly there are some deficiencies which won't give us the full benefit right away. Hopefully they can be looked into and cured. If you remember, when we moved at the state level from state sales tax to state VAT, there were very similar complaints and forecasts of not working well. Two states, big states, UP and Tamil Nadu, didn't join. But when they saw its success, and India had growth of over 9% in those years when that was introduced, when they saw the success, they quickly joined the system. I think similarly, GST will quickly get into a smooth pattern, and government will make the positive changes which are required to make it even better.
Okay. Credit offtake is down to about 5% from a double-digit growth. NPAs of banks is a huge problem which has remained largely untackled. We are entering into the third year of this government. Mr. Parekh, let me begin by asking you, is creating a bad bank a solution? What would you advise to the government on how, one, the urgency of this, and second, what's the best possible way to tackle this?
No, first of all, I would say that credit offtake of 5% should not be viewed as a negative, because there are a number of things that go into a credit offtake. Look at the deleveraging that is taking place amongst Indian industry. I can give you dozens of large corporates who have sold assets and who have paid off banks with foreign direct investment, with a new purchaser. So the debt has come down. If the debt has come down, the offtake is net offtake. So because deleveraging is happening, $40 billion worth of deleveraging has happened by getting money from PEs in 1 year, and it's all gone to the banking sector to be repaid. Whether it is DLF selling assets to GIC, or SR selling assets to Rosneft, or GVK Airport selling it to Fairfax. There are a number of cases like this, I know. So deleveraging is happening, which is reducing bank outstanding credit. The other reason is that most companies are now accessing the bond market directly, bypassing the bank. Transmission of interest rates is immediate in the bond market and takes a long time with the banking sector. So if you enter the bond market, the debenture market, the market has huge, expanded. External commercial borrowings, because of India's standing and India corporate, the good companies can access international fund with very ease. We have done large amounts of masala bonds, which were never heard of, and very successfully. That the government Reserve Bank has given us additional amount to go and raise masala bonds. So, people are accessing capital markets. PE money is coming. Foreign direct investment this year has been the highest so far. That again goes to reduce the debt temporarily.
PE money is down actually now. PE and VC funding is down.
No, it's not down. It is much higher than earlier. It replaces one PE from the other. So one PE exits, another PE comes in. I don't see PE money coming down. There are large PEs with deep pockets who are desperately wanting to get more participate in acquisition of Indian companies and Indian assets. The main reason why credit offtake has come down is raw material prices have come down. Oil is less than half. Oil credit was a huge amount in the banking sector. Now that amount required by oil marketing companies has come down significantly. So, don't look at it, it's a wrong notion. The 5% credit offtake, I think, is a wrong notion. You have to look at the totality of the funding. Now, on the bad bank thing, I think both the Reserve Bank and the Finance Ministry are looking with the Bank Bureau Board, BBB, they're looking at different ways and different methods of trying to reduce the NPA problem. Yes, we have a large NPA problem, and we have to use different methods. Bad bank cannot be for the entire bad loans. It could be piloted with one bank or two banks to put their loans in a bad bank. Selling loans to asset reconstruction companies is one way banks are handling this. Government has now allowed 100% equity in ARCs, so that we get foreign investors coming in and starting ARCs with large amount of capital to buy Indian assets. So a lot of work is going on. You will see progress during the current year, and you will see different banks using different approaches.
Okay, so you're confident that in the current year, we will see some resolution.
It is getting the highest attention
in the government,
and the Reserve Bank.
Okay, that's heartening to know. Well, the government has started this entire operation cleanup. Mr. Godrej, after demonetization, this entire process about tackling black money, what would you say are the logical next steps to take for the government to really complete the circle?
To my mind, the next step which will have the greatest effect on curtailing unaccounted money in the country will be the introduction of the GST. Because a lot of the black money in India is generated by evasion of taxes like excise duty, etc. And that leads to evasion of direct taxes also. Now with GST, the ability to evade indirect taxes will become very difficult. And people who are used to that business model will have to either pay taxes or get out. So I think that will be a major next step for the economy in reducing unaccounted money. And it may not need any major further government action. But there are clearly some things like Benami properties and things like that which can help. But they are going to have less of an effect than demonetization had or that GST will have.
Okay. Mr. Parekh, your thoughts on the next steps that the government ought to take?
Well, the entire exercise was a pre-planned exercise. If you see, when the government came into power, it said we'll weed out corruption, ease of doing business, Jan Dhan accounts, direct benefit transfer, and one was black money. And if you see, the government started with tax treaties with Singapore, Cyprus and Mauritius. Then they had a black money bill to attract Indians who have money abroad to come in. Then there was an income disclosure scheme here. OECD countries have a pact with Indian government that if Indians open account in OECD countries, the government will know of it. So and last was demonetization. And again, as Adi says, Benami properties one hears is one way of trying to, I've heard all kinds of rumors, and this is all rumors, that bank lockers is one thing, Benami properties. So the process is still on till the amount of black money gets reduced in the system. And I think the process should continue because, it will help India if the black money, the government can raise far more resources which will help infrastructure, which will help the social sectors like education and healthcare, if they have more revenue from taxes.
Okay. So I have to ask you this, both of you, that if, we'll start with Mr. Godrej. Mr. Godrej, if you were FM on November 8th, what advice would you have given on demonetization?
Well, whatever one thinks of today is in hindsight. And we must remember, if something has to be done on that day, there would be very little hindsight available on an issue like this,
Sure.
which is not common in any country, etc. So I would say that I was surprised at two things. At the effectiveness was more than I expected. Two, the remonetization in terms of consumer demand came back reasonably well, although there were a lot of complaints. And thirdly, I was very surprised at the populace supporting it as well as it did, which we really found out when the election results came recently.
So what advice would you have given?
Well, as I said, it's not right to think of advice you give post facto. Yeah, because nobody had the data. But if it was public, I would have been very, very careful about that.
Very careful. So you would have advised against it? Okay. Mr. Parekh?
No, I would have said go for it. Let's go for it. Let's take the bull by the horn. We are demonetizing 84% of our currency. It'll throw the economy out of gear, but let's go for it. Because we have to handle the black money. We have to increase the tax base. We have to handle the counterfeit currency. And these issues were very, very prominent and need to be tackled. It's a big bang reform. Let's go for it. We'll face the consequences.
Okay. Mr. Parekh, also, I have to ask you another question. So you've been on many government committees. You are the crisis manager for the government for India Inc. When do we see you as part of the government?
I'm too old for it.
Not at all. Age is just a number. So are we ruling out any government position?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Godrej, we all know about your love for the city of Mumbai, but if there was any other city that you would have a choice to live in India, which one would that be?
In India, that's difficult to tell because I've only traveled to these other cities, never having experienced that. But I think perhaps Bangalore.
Bangalore. Okay. And very quickly, closing comments on your outlook on the revival of private investment. Because I'll come back to you after whatever time frame you've given to check.
Can you repeat the question?
Your outlook on the revival of the private investment.
No, I think it's
cycle.
around the corner. You will see it this year. And you will see we have not, the better days in India are to come now. Because the macro fundamentals are so strong. I have in 50 years never seen such strong macro fundamentals in India.
Okay.
I would say from the second half of the next financial year. It will pick up very considerably.
Very considerably. So more jobs then. Okay, thank you very much. We're ending the session on a very optimistic note and we are bang on time. So thank you very much, sir.
Indeed. Thank you. Mr. Parekh, Mr. Godrej, I would request you to stay on stage, please, Mr. Parekh. May I please invite on stage Mr. T.S. Kalyana Raman, CMD Kalyan Jewellers, to kindly come on stage and give a small token of thanks for your time, Mr. Godrej and Mr. Parekh. Let's hear it for our guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.